Hey everyone. So I have something I'm very excited about. My wife showed me the first interview of Peter Elgorriaga. Not sure how to say his name, but we were just chatting and she was like, "Here, listen to this for a little bit." And so I started listening, and wow, there were some things that really stood out to me. So I analyzed his whole entire statement. So I know that I said I was going to go over Lakeland, but I just couldn't help it. There were a few things that he said, but one thing in particular that I just couldn't let go. So let's get into it. All right.
Hello?
Hello, this is Detective Lehman with the Idaho State Police. Is this,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce your last name. It's a beautiful last name.
Basque.
Yeah, so the reason why I'm reaching out to you, we are following up with the today. Things have kind of needed to be expedited, so I'm going to reach out to you by phone, and has said that you may be one of the people who was with Xana and Ethan in the early morning hours. I'll just let you speak for a moment. Tell me about that.
Okay, yeah, I was with him. We were at the Sigma Chi party.
Okay.
It ended at 1 o'clock, and we went back down to my...
Okay. Here we go. Okay. How are we looking? All right. All right. So the analyst, myself, is presupposing that the subject is innocent and has no guilty knowledge of the deaths of the 4 victims in the Idaho 4 case. So we have Detective Lehman and Trooper Kristin. This interview took place on November 18th, 2022. And by the way, this video does not have transcripts at this point, or like a transcript on YouTube, it looks like. Not that I could tell. Yeah, it still is not on there. I just wanted to double check. And there's also not subtitles. So it's just going to be audio on that, but it is what it is. All right. So we have the greeting here and an explanation. I don't know what happened here. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce your last name. It's a beautiful last name. Yep, Basque. I don't know what he says there. So I would love it if someone explained that to me. That was super weird. Really has no bearing on anything, but just thought it was kind of funny. So the detective asks a really good question here. So she just kind of explains, you may be one of the people who was with Xana and Ethan. She says their name wrong. In the early morning hours. I'll just let you speak for a moment. Tell me about that. Really good way to start this interview off. And the subject says, okay, yeah, I was with him. We were at the Sigma Chi party. Here's the analysis. Okay, yeah. May have been in response to him being one of the last ones to see Xana and Ethan. I was with him. I am pretty sure he says him. I'm like 99% sure. I don't think he says them. Okay. So this is an indication with the pronoun I that he's psychologically placing himself there fully into the statement regarding the time and place. I was with him. This is what we like to see. We see an interesting pronoun choice here with him. We assume that this is Ethan by choosing him. It's noted that he doesn't say them. It appears he and Ethan were together at this point, which doesn't include Xana. I was with him. If that is the intended complete sentence, There's a breath after these words. I was with him, breath. We were at the Sigma Chi party. Then I and Ethan are separated with, which the word with denotes distancing. It's kind of a weird sentence there. I with him. Okay. Also, by employing I was with him, there is a lack of acknowledgement of Xana here, which may indicate psychological distancing with Xana. The detective had mentioned both Ethan and Xana. However, she mispronounced Xana and said Xana. So this could be why. Just noting possibilities here. A note on social introduction. The detective already knows who Ethan and Xana is as she's asking about his experience regarding the early morning hours before their deaths. The detective has introduced Ethan and Xana into the statement. So that said, the subject does not explain the nature of his relationship with either victims right away, which are required for a complete social introduction. I was with my friends Ethan and Xana. We would like to see this. We want to know the linguistic disposition that the subject has towards each victim. We were at the Sigma Chi party. We denotes closeness and unity, and we are interpreting this as subject and Ethan at this point. Why? I was with him. We were at the Sigma Chi party. But he may be internally including others here, specifically Xana, but we don't interpret. We do notice there's a here, which is a pause, which indicates sensitivity. And the Sigma Chi party is the location. Okay. Detective says just that. Okay. Subject. It ended at 1, and we went back down to redacted, unfortunately. So we do deal with redactions on this video as well. Analysis. Indicates another pause, indicating sensitivity. It ended at 1. What about it ended at 1? Was it a scheduled party? Was it an official time? If not, this is peculiar. The detective is trying to understand the subject's experience with Ethan and Xana that night, and she asked a great question. Tell me about that. This is the subject going back into the free editing process all on his own. There is no contamination here so far. When the party ended is not relevant if they left early, changed locations, continue to visit, or party privately. Real quick, let me make sure. All right, we're good. We don't interpret, but it appears that the subject is intending to say that it ended at 1, and after it ended, the subject says, and we went back down to blank. The subject has not made it clear exactly who is we at this point. The lack of clarity here is curious. It brings the question to the mind. Why is he not being clear about this? The subject, the location he, quote, went back down to is redacted, unfortunately. Back down indicates the subject and Ethan, or we, had been there before, possibly the subject's place. We don't know. Down may indicate the subject views the other place as lower elevation, or perhaps it is the south of the lodge, to the south of the lodge, or it could simply be how the subject perceives the location in reference to the lodge. Could just be a part of his speech of how he references places in general. Okay, let's get back to our interview here, the audio.
We were at the Sigma Chi party.
Okay.
It ended at 1 o'clock, and we went back down to my.
Okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and listen to this.
Okay.
And went down there to grab a couple things, and then we went back into the lodge, and Xana and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I, and that's the last time I saw them. They said they were going to come with us, but nobody remembers them coming with us there. I've asked all of because we went to AGR, another fraternity right there,
Okay.
neighboring to us, and I asked them, and they don't remember them being there, so I'm pretty positive they weren't there.
They were.
All right. This was Very interesting words by Mr. Peter here. Okay, the subject. So this is all continuing on from tell me more about that. Okay, so he talks about this. He talks about this. The detective is just saying K, and he keeps going on. This is beautiful. And went down there to grab a couple things. I will try to get this here. Come on, don't do this to me. All right, that's fine. And went down there to grab a couple things. We have a repeat of this phrasing, which indicates sensitivity. Okay. So before, it ended at 1, and we went back down to my, and went down there. Okay. That's what I mean by a repeat of this phrasing. There's a drop pronoun the second time. There's no we or I or they or he or she. Right here. We do not know for sure who went down there to, quote, grab a couple things. This may be an indication of psychological distancing from that location. We also have a change in language. We went back down to my, and then went down there. The redaction makes this very difficult to understand the reason for the change of the language. Was there a third location? This is not clear. Okay, so if you're confused right now, look, it ended at 1, and we went back down to my blank and went down there to grab a couple things. All right. So this change of language, went back down to my blank and then went down there. We want to understand why that change of language happened. It's unknown. To grab a couple things. The subject now explains why they went wherever it was that they went, which is a sensitivity indication that the subject felt the need to explain to the detective why he went to wherever it was. This suggests that the subject was preempting a question. Why did you go over to blank? His reason for going there is to grab a couple things. The subject doesn't offer to explain what those things were. So this results in an explanation that lacks information. This is peculiar and brings attention to the question of what are those things and why is this sensitive to the subject? I'm just going to tell you, this is going to be something by the end of this that's going to be really important. And then is an indication of passage of time, which means there's missing information. We went back into the lodge, only allowing the subject to guide via his words. This would mean the subject and Ethan. Also, there's another back, which indicates that the subject was basically at place A, not sure where that was, then place B, the lodge, then went back to place A, and now back to place B. All right. He's using back twice. We also have a change of language. At first, it was the Sigma Chi party, and then it changed to the lodge. This is either 1, because the party had ended, or 2, he grabbed a couple things. All right. We're going to keep moving on here. I put this in here so that we can not lose track of the statement. So this is a snippet of the same exact statement up here. All right. So now we're going to focus on these words. We are confronted with surprising words here. And Xana and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I. We were understanding if we interpreted that based on his words, and then me and Ethan went back into the lodge, and Xana and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I. Okay. Looking back, if we was Xana, Ethan, subject's girlfriend, and the subject, then this sentence may even be more peculiar. So it seems that we wasn't all 4 of those. So again, who is we? The subject has concealed this information. Okay, look. Let's even go further. It ended at 1, and we went back down to my. We went back down to my, and went down there to grab a couple things, and then we went back into the lodge, and Xan and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I. If it's all 4 of them, so we here, let's just plug that in. went down there to grab a couple things, and then Xan, Ethan, me, and my girlfriend went back into the lodge, and Xan and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I. That's the problem. The subject has concealed this information. We also have an incomplete social introduction to the subject's girlfriend. We're not given her name. We're given 2 of the 3, my and girlfriend, but missing the name. This denotes psychological distancing with the girlfriend. Now, this could be because at the time of the statement, there was psychological distancing, or at the time of this interview, there is psychological distancing. The detective, so far as we know, or the subject knows, doesn't know who the subject's girlfriend is. So the lack of complete social introduction is noted and is going to be something that is looked for moving forward in the statement. We also see the subject refers to Xana as Xan. The shortened version of Xana gives the impression of a close relationship between the subject and Xana. This speaks to history between the two. With separating Xan and Ethan and my girlfriend and I denotes distancing, emotional or physical. All right. Xan and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I. With separates my girlfriend and I, that they could not be farther apart. My girlfriend and I, Xan and Ethan, in the sentence. All right. That's what I'm talking about. So this is curious. There appears to be a close relationship between Xana and the subject, and yet we see the distancing at the same time. Given the apparent concealment of who we is, it brings the question up, was we the subject in Xana? There was a drop pronoun here. Went down there to grab a couple things. Okay. We went back down to went there to, was this Xana and the subject? So, and not only that, but again, we don't have a social introduction for Xana and Ethan. Detective Ethan is my friend. Xana is his girlfriend. There's no, we look for my title, friend, girlfriend, mom, dad, whatever, and name. Okay, this denotes respect, and it shares the relationship, the quality of the relationship. When this is hidden or concealed or not referred to, this denotes disrespect. And when we are talking about victims, and the subject knows the victims and has some sort of relationship with them, this is a big major flag. Okay. All right. So let's review. And went there to grab a couple things, and then we went back into the lodge, and Xan and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend, and that's the last time I saw them. Okay. So far, we understand very little. We don't know the location or locations that they went to other than the lodge, and all we really have is that the 4 were at the Sigma Chi. That and the subject and 1 or more went with him, went somewhere to grab a couple things and came back. There's very little being shared. This is not expected. And he is now finishing with, that's the last time I saw him. The subject continues on. So we're hoping that we're going to get more information and his insight as to the victim's status at this time, right? Whereabouts in the party, conversations and thoughts they had, intentions, their mood, their relationships, potential conflicts, etc. Insight as to the victim's status, the subject's status. The subject may have precious insight and information that could help in locating the source of the Idaho 4 murders after all. And by the way, this is one reason why Peter stood out to me. One of the things the detective says, you were known to be one of the last people to ever see Ethan and Xana. Ethan and Xana is a huge question mark. after analyzing Dylan and Bethany, for me, Ethan and Xana is a huge question mark. This Peter has very interesting information. Oh, all right. They said they were going to come with us, but nobody remembers them coming with us there. We are now confronted with more unexpected words here. They said, are we to understand they as Ethan and Xana? And did they both say this? This is why this is confusing. One reason why this is confusing. It's unclear. Who said this? What's the problem with saying Ethan said they were going to come with us, or Xana said they were going to come with us, or we had talked about them coming with us, right? We discussed that together. Ethan wasn't sure because of X, Xana wasn't sure because of X, whatever. All right, said this is in the context of an investigation. This is in the context of Ethan and Xana have been murdered. Okay, this is someone who was the last ones to see them. I mean, being unclear about this is why is that happening? Okay, anyway, I don't need to convince anybody of anything. I think the analysis is going to show is going to help a lot. Anyway, said here is a soft word indicating low or no tension. We're gonna doesn't mean that they did come with us. It speaks to intention. They said they intended to come with us, right? They were gonna come with us. It's an intention. This is not the same thing as they were going to come later or they were going to come behind us. Come with us denotes together. But nobody remembers them coming with us there. Things that are said in the negative, what nobody remembers in statement analysis, is oftentimes more important than that which is said in the positive. I'm going to give some examples here. So if you've heard this, forgive me. Example, if I asked you, where were you yesterday when you didn't win the lottery? You would say, huh? It is extremely rare that we mark memories by what didn't happen. Back to the statement. And one of the most important things here, so far in the statement, the subject is not saying, I don't remember them coming with us there. Okay? I don't remember. I mean, that would be a weird thing. I don't remember them coming with us. But still, that's less strange than nobody remembers them coming with us there. Out of anyone, it would be the subject who would remember who came with him or us. We also don't know where there is, which makes this even more peculiar at this point. It appears the subject has psychologically moved on to another location without explaining that location. This denotes psychological distancing with that location, and it indicates the subject's priority. To be clear, before the subject clarifies where this place is, he first explains, nobody remembers them coming with us. The subject is alerting that he has a need to not share what he himself remembers. His own memory is sensitive to him. He is psychologically distancing himself from speaking from his own memory, his own testimony of what he saw or experienced. This is not a good sign here, given this is right at the most delicate time when he saw the two victims last. Okay, I'm gonna get back to this here, but look. I saw them. They said they were gonna come with us, but nobody remembers them coming with us. This is what we're being confronted with here. How does he know what nobody remembers? Being strictly logical, this is an almost omniscient view. Additionally, this was about 5 days after the Idaho four were murdered. This wasn't a long time ago, and yet the subject is talking about remembering. He's not saying, I think they went home. Everyone I asked said that they didn't see Ethan and Xana after I left from Sigma Chi. What is being insinuated, we don't interpret, is that he expected to see them there, and they didn't show up in the final analysis only hours later after they passed away. Now, that's actually giving him way too much credit, because they said they were going to come with us, right? So that would be an emotional piece for the subject, right? He expected to see them there. They didn't show up. And hours later, they passed away. That would be an emotional piece. A specific question would rattle around the subject's mind. What if they had come with us that night instead of going home? They may be fine and alive today. Nobody remembers them coming with us there. One final thing on this. This sentence here very well may be leakage of a simple idea that they did come with us. He again is not saying they didn't come with us there. Instead, nobody remembers them coming with us there. Whether people remember something or not doesn't change the fact of the matter. It doesn't change whether or not something did or didn't actually happen, like them coming with us. I've asked all of because we went to AGR, another fraternity right there neighboring to us, and I asked them and they don't remember them being there, so I'm pretty positive they weren't there. I've asked all of is a broken segment here that the subject interprets himself to explain location and eventually continues on with, I asked them and they don't remember them being there, so I'm pretty positive they went there. They weren't there, right? Before the subject finished off this last part that was just mentioned, he explains, because we went to AGR, another fraternity right there neighboring to us. And we have another hitch here between, because we went to AGR, which combined with the initial interruption, I've asked all of because we were, right, may indicate higher internal tension, stress here, considering we also have a sensitivity indication here of the subject explaining why with the cuz and the so. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The subject explains why nobody remembers them coming with us there. The subject may have anticipated the question from the detective about how he knew what nobody remembers. His answer is that we went to AGR and he asked them, and they don't remember them being there. The subject is choosing to talk about the victims as them, it appears. Did he ask whoever it is exactly if they saw them? Like literally, did you see them? Or did he ask if they saw Ethan and Kaylee? There appears to be some psychological distancing here with them. And this is twofold. The subject is not explaining who is them, referring to who the subject communicated with. He says, I asked them, the AGR fraternity. Okay. Is them a leader there? Is them every single one of them living there? He's not specifying. There's also a change of language. I've asked all of got interrupted, and he then said, I asked them. This is very interesting. All got dropped. So he didn't ask all, whoever all is in his mind. If we can't say it, if he can't say it, we won't say it for him. We also don't know who we is here, in that we don't know who went to AGR. It seems like he's saying the subject and his girlfriend. We don't interpret, and we are open to many options here. The lack of clarity of who all of these are is an indication of concealing. I mean, it's a clear indication of concealing. The subject then finishes with, I'm pretty positive. I'm positive they weren't there. He's not saying that. The pretty indicates the weakness. It's a caveat. If the subject had a shadow of a doubt, we would expect, I'm not positive about that. They may have been there. I'm not going to say I know something if I don't. I have nothing to persuade about. That's what we're expecting. That kind of attitude, that kind of language. There is a need to persuade here. Okay. It's worse than this, however. The subject is saying, so I'm pretty positive. So I'm pretty positive. In other words, because I asked them and they don't remember them being there, I'm pretty positive they weren't there. Again, he all on his own is qualifying his pretty positive they weren't there because of others' memory of a place the subject went to. He is not appealing to his own memory. The detective is not asking him to be the detective and ask others for their testimonies. The detective has called the subject, literally on the phone, to understand his account. Remember, he dropped all. This indicates there are more to ask. He psychologically has notified us that psychologically he knows. He can't say that he asked all. So again, why the need to persuade that the victims weren't there? Okay, so here's a little. This is a very interesting statement. It's kind of hard to communicate all this and show this all in this word program on YouTube. So I just thought this would be helpful. Here's the unnecessary information in pink. Okay, white. Okay, yeah, I was with him and we were at Sigma Chi party that ended at 1. Xana and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I, and that's the last time I saw him. Okay, fine. No. And we went back down to my blank and went down there to grab a couple things. And then we went back in the lodge, and Xana and Ethan were in the lodge with my girlfriend and I, and that's the last time I saw them. They said they were going to come with us, but nobody remembers them coming with us there. I've asked all of the, because we went to AGR, another fraternity right there, neighboring to us, and I asked them, and they don't remember them being there. So I'm pretty positive they weren't there. Unnecessary information is so important. Okay. We're going to go back to our interview.
Not at AGI, and that is
Yeah. AGR.
AGR.
Yeah.
Alpha Gamma Rho.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is that considered the lodge?
No, the lodge is at Sigma Chi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your apartment number? And what is your girlfriend's name? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. And her last name? Okay. Okay. Can you describe what Ethan and Xana were wearing the last you saw them?
Oh shoot, I don't remember what they were wearing. I know Ethan and I were at Kappa Alpha Theta's formal. Ethan went to that, and he might have been in his nice clothes still, but I honestly can't remember.
All right, back to the analysis. I want to know Peter's girlfriend's name. I definitely want to know that. Okay. So the detective. Okay. Can you describe what Ethan and Xana were wearing last time you saw them? Oh shoot, I don't remember what they were wearing. I know Ethan and I were at Kappa Alpha Theta's formal. Ethan went with, according to Bethany, this is Ethan's sister, to that, and he might have been in his nice clothes still, but I honestly can't remember. Analysis. Oh shoot, this indicates sensitivity to the question with these pauses fillers. I don't remember what they were wearing. The subject could have stopped there, but he continues on. Right? I don't remember what they were wearing. He continues on. I know Ethan and I. Here the subject separates Ethan and Xana, connects Ethan with the subject. Right? This kind of language is not what he did earlier. Earlier he said, I was with him. We were at the Sigma Chi party. And he was unclear about the we and the them and so forth. This underscores the analysis up above with the first main piece of the statement. We have contrast here. This is important as this provides context and hardening that clay of the analysis above. Ethan went with blank to that. We're not sure based on the interview who it is, according to Bethany Funke's statement. This was Ethan's sister. Note, Dylan Mortensen makes no mention of this. He might have been in his nice clothes still. The subject remembers leaving the lodge and grabbing a couple things, but he doesn't remember what Ethan and Xana wore. He is saying that Ethan may have had his nice clothes on merely because he was wearing his nice clothes at the formal. This might be another indication of such psychological distancing from his memories of the lodge, that time, and that entire experience regarding the victims. Okay? He's not appealing to his memory of the time at the lodge. He's appealing to, well, since formal happened, he may have still been in those clothes. That indicates psychological distancing from the memories surrounding the lodge area. The subject is talking about previous time or events and going into details, who Ethan went with, about that event, the formal, but appears to have a need to not want to go into details about this event in question, Sigma Chi. Still here indicates a challenge or change may have occurred. Okay? Might have been in his nice clothes still. This makes some sense because there were two different settings being compared with, two different parties, right? But I honestly can't remember. But indicates refuting and or minimizing that which was said before it regarding wearing his nice clothes. Honestly is an unnecessary caveat. I can't remember is likely to be true. The employing of honestly is something we need to think about, as honesty may be on the subject's mind. When honestly is used, it may indicate that honesty is something he hasn't done thus far. It brings to question, is he being honest now and he wasn't before? Or vice versa? Okay. We may get more insight as we move on through the statement. All right. Let's go back.
So there was a formal before the Sigma Chi party?
Yeah, for a sorority house. The one that Ethan's sister was a part of.
Okay. Which sorority was that? Okay, and that was a formal party.
Yeah.
The party at the lodge at Sigma Chi, was that a formal party or? No,
it wasn't a formal.
Did it have a theme at all?
The theme was like ESPN, so it's like a sports theme, like jerseys, that type of thing.
Okay. Can y'all see? Yep. So there was a formal before the Sigma Chi party. Yeah, for a different sorority house, the one that Ethan's sister is a part of. The subject has a hitch here and goes back and drops different for some reason. This indicates sensitivity regarding that specific word different, which is connected with sorority. It seems he was thinking about Sigma Chi's fraternity, which wouldn't be a different sorority because Sigma Chi is not a sorority. So he may have self-corrected there. Okay, which sorority was that? It's redacted. If the subject says here, if he actually said Kappa Alpha Theta here and it's redacted, that makes no sense, right? Earlier, the subject said Kappa Alpha Theta is formal. That was in the recording. So did he say a different sorority here? I mean, this is confusing. It really doesn't bear any weight to the final analysis, but just something that bugs me. Okay, and that was a formal party? Yeah. Anything said twice is marked as sensitive. I'm not sure why he says twice. Yeah, twice. This may indicate internal tension, or stress. And just so you know, there's going to be a whole lot of this right here. All right. The party at the lodge at Sigma Chi, was that a formal party or no? No, it wasn't a formal. Did it have a theme at all? The theme was like ESPN. So it's like a sports theme, like jerseys, that type of thing. Well, this is perfect because the detective had just asked the subject about what Ethan wore at Sigma Chi. So this was a good question by the detective. It uncovered something important. Sigma Chi had a clothing theme, ESPN, jerseys, that type of thing. Earlier, the subject opined that Ethan may have been in his formal clothes. This logically means Ethan would have not matched with the theme of the party. This seems natural that Ethan would have stood out at the party then. It is unknown what were the exact requirements, more importantly, the level of enforcement of this dress requirement at the Sigma Chi party. Was this something that was conventionally assumed by everyone? Was this a loose requirement? Was this more strictly enforced? And if you didn't show up correctly, you got publicly shamed or even kicked out. So is this even really possible that Ethan could show up in formal clothes? Is it even possible? Well, so this is unknown. Even more importantly, it seems like the memory of what Ethan was wearing would stick out in the minds of those that saw Ethan at Sigma Chi, especially by people who knew him, like the subject. And this is to say nothing about Xana. What was Xana wearing? So I hope you're seeing the problem here. Okay, the drama. Maybe we will get more clarity as we listen on. All right, let's listen on.
Okay. Do you remember them having any kind of sports apparel on?
I really don't.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm sorry to put you through this. I know this is really difficult. And just to kind of maybe jog your memory, do you remember taking any photos with them that night?
I looked on my camera roll and my Snapchat memories, and I don't have anything from after the formal party where Ethan and I were in our nice clothes.
Okay. This is really, really big. Okay, do you remember them having any kind of sports apparel on? Great question. Right? ESPN. Okay, cool. We're going to maybe get some information. I really don't. I'm sorry. There was hope that this would refresh the subject's memory about the attire of Ethan and Xana. We have some emphasis here with really, which may be an indication of persuasion. I don't remember is simple and would lack persuasion, indicating is likely true. The really here only serves to bring weakness to this denial. Additionally, we are confronted with, I am sorry, and I put that in red. Without interpreting, this would mean he apologizes for not remembering what the victims wore. But what the victims wore at the Sigma Chi party may help the investigation in finding the murderers or the murderer. The subject might be apologizing simply for not being able to help the investigation due to his lack of memory. However, anytime I am sorry or sorry is in an open statement, we flag it for potential indication of a deeper guilt, considering the context that Ethan and Xana were murdered shortly after this event. This is not a conclusion, it's merely a consideration. Some more questions about this would have been great to qualify how much did the subject remember about the Sigma Chi party altogether, right? Let's go back to the Sigma Chi party when you first arrived. What happened? Because as I'm analyzing this, what exactly does he know about this party? He's given us so little. So questioning, hey, talk to me more about the Sigma Chi party. How much do you know? Is this someone that was only there for a few minutes? And that would shed a whole lot more light as to why there was so little information here, right? The detective says, okay, no worries. I'm sorry to put you through this. I know this is really difficult. And just to kind of maybe jog your memory, do you remember taking any photos with them that night? So I'm going to analyze the detective here. The detective is apologizing for doing the job of a detective unprompted. If the subject is an innocent entity who had a meaningful relationship with these victims, which we're presupposing, the subject would be doing right by the victims and these people or person that they had a meaningful relationship with, and helping the investigator locate the criminal or criminals who did this. There is no apology for this. Asking about taking any photos is a fair and common sense question. She's not leaving this line of questioning alone, which is commendable. Okay. So I'm giving a little bit of a sandwich here. Some pretty harsh critique here for the detective, but I'm glad that she's asking about the photos because he didn't say anything here. Now, I'll just tell you, after analyzing this and reading back some of this early stuff, it is wild how much just a few words actually found out a whole lot here. So just I'm eager. I'm very eager. Okay. I looked on my camera roll and my snapshot memories, and I don't have anything past anything from after the formal party where Ethan and I were in our nice clothes. Analysis. The subject had already thought of this. I looked on my camera roll. He had already looked. Past tense. I looked. Then the subject communicates in present tense. I don't have. The question that comes to mind, did you have them? I looked on my camera roll and my snapshot memories, and I didn't have anything past the formal party. That's not what he said. This change from tenses may indicate he deleted information. Further, I don't have anything past anything. We have a repeated word indicating sensitivity and potentially internal stress and tension here. Strictly logically, he has said that he doesn't have anything after the formal party. That would include up until the moment of this interview, which is 5 days later. He doesn't explain when the next picture was taken. He fails to mention that. He chooses not to, I should say. He also doesn't mention his girlfriend's photos. He had already looked at his phone contents for this, apparently. And earlier, he had asked, not all, he dropped all, but he asked them at the whatever place it was, the AGR, and nobody remembers them being there. What about others at the Sigma Chi party since he had already thought about these things? Did he not also ask people in his circles about pictures of Ethan and Xana at Sigma Chi? He doesn't share this information. I hope you're getting what I'm putting down here, but picking up what I'm putting down. Also, anything is not specific. He is not saying, I don't have any photos of Ethan and Xana at the Sigma Chi. And he's not saying, my most recent picture of Ethan and Xana was of them at this time and of this place. Anything is passive. This would mean not one picture or snapshot of anything. This underscores the pressing concern. Did he delete information? We also have to consider the fact he does have photos of Ethan from a formal event. He takes photos. So the question is, if he doesn't have anything related to the photos from Sigma Chi, why did he take photos there and not at Sigma Chi? Oh, sorry. Try this again. So the question is, if he doesn't have anything related to photos from the Sigma Chi, why did he take photos at formal and not Sigma Chi? The subject is really sorry he can't remember what Ethan and Xana was wearing, and he also didn't take photos at Sigma Chi, even though he did it formal. He doesn't specify when he began taking photos after Sigma Chi, and he doesn't mention anyone else who may have had one photo of Ethan and Xana, like his girlfriend. You got that? Ethan and I were in our nice clothes. Ethan and I indicates this is a photo or photos of the two together in the photo or photos, the subject and Ethan. Apparently, this photo or photos Do or does not include Xana. I made that very difficult. All right. Let's get back to it.
Okay. So there's the previous party that you do have a pic of Ethan.
Yeah.
If I were to give you, well, you have my telephone number, and I can give you my email as well. Would I be able to get a copy of that?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Okay.
I can send it to you just text message, or does that work?
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. Describe, so you were described to me as a very good friend of Ethan's, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Tell me about that. How often did you speak to Ethan? How often were you with Ethan?
I spoke to Ethan every day, multiple times a day. He was in my apartment, I don't know, 4 days out of the week, just hanging out. And it doesn't make any sense to me because he's not the type of guy that has any enemies, and I don't understand. He didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. So.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, so there's the previous party that you do have a pic of Ethan. Yeah. If I were to give you, well, you have my telephone number and subject, yeah. I can give you my email as well. Would I be able to get a copy of that? Yeah, I can send it to you. There's apparently one photo, as he said, it. What is not being said here is what is important. Are there not any other helpful photos? Put yourself in this situation. We just heard the detective talk about how close of friends he is. One photo. No other photos that would help? The subject doesn't offer this or talk about it. We've been trying to understand the psychological disposition to the victims. Okay, the subject's psychological disposition. A psychological disposition that is respectful and concerned for the victims and the investigation is what we would expect to see in the subject's words. It's hard to argue that this, so far, is being observed. Can, okay, the use of can here is not the same thing as will. Can could be understood as an obligatory word. I can take out the trash versus I will take out the trash. Can is passive. Okay, it's potential. I can. I have the ability. Not necessarily will I. This may be a small indication of sensitivity and psychological distancing, okay, about this photo. He's not saying, of course, whatever I can do to help. That's what we want to see. We want to see that eagerness to help and to provide anything he can do to assist. Okay, I can send it to you just text message, or does that work? The can again is used here, indicating more of a pattern in a context. There is a just here, which indicates possibly in the subject's mind text message is the only way he can send it. Is this because of a lack of knowledge regarding how to email the photo, or is this an indication of a subtle psychological distancing to this? Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, that's perfect. Describe. So you were described to me as a very good friend of Ethan's. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, that's parroted here, right? This was a great opportunity for the subject to share more about this, to talk about the victim that he was very good friends with. The subject merely answers the question and doesn't provide anything further. The detective gave the subject words here and contaminated this interview. Okay. So you were described to me as a very good friend of Ethan's. Is that correct? The subject has had minutes now. I think it started about 5 minutes ago in this conversation. We still don't have a complete social introduction of the victims. the detective is clearly telling us there's not an indication here that this. I'm not analyzing the detective. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she's wondering about, is this a good friend of Ethan's? Okay. Now, that should be a huge indication in and of itself, but we're seeing way more than that. I mean, but just this question right here, we've gotten a lot of indications so far that this is a big, huge question. So, unfortunately, she contaminated this. Instead of just asking the subject about his relationship, allowing the subject to communicate this relationship with the victim in his own words, to articulate this in his own way. The detective gave him the words, very good friend of Ethan's, and this was not a good decision and does not help the analysis. This is really not good. Okay, tell me about that. So he didn't say it. He just, so, hey, you're described as very good friends with Ethan. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's correct. That's it. So tell me about that. How do you know? How often do you speak with Ethan? How often were you with Ethan? The detective could have simply just asked, "Tell me more about that." That's it. Just leave it there. Magical words. I spoke to Ethan every day, multiple times a day. He was in my apartment. I don't know, 4 days out of the week, just hanging out, and it doesn't make any sense to me because he is not the type of guy to have any enemies. He didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. So, okay, this is really important. I spoke to Ethan every day, multiple times a day. This is passive language. There is no quality being communicated here, only quantity. It sounds like a close relationship by the quantity, but what is lacking and what we want to see is the quality of the relationship. What kind of words were being spoken? What is the content of the communication? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? This is merely quantity. So we listen on. Well, I guess I contradict myself here. Every day since when? 4 days out of the week? For how long has this been the case? Okay. Every day, multiple times a day. Every day? I mean, every day since you guys have been born, multiple times a day, 4 days out of the week. For how long? Right. So there's also just kind of not clarity about that. So we just have to be careful. Is a pause, which indicates sensitivity. The is right here. He was in my apartment, I don't know, for 4 days out of the week, just hanging out. The repeated word here indicates sensitivity and possibly internal stress or tension. I don't know is unexpected. We expect the subject to know and to talk about what he knows, his closeness with Ethan, his experience with Ethan, his relationship. We are also getting more quantity here. Multiple times a day. He was in my apartment, I don't know, for 4 days out of the week. Okay. There's proximity here. He was in my apartment, which denotes physical proximity, closeness. This is not language that indicates the personal psychological closeness and emotional closeness, which is what we expect for very good friends, right? For very good friends. Also, he was in my apartment is passive language. The connection here is not with the subject and Ethan, it is with Ethan and the apartment. It could be interpreted as Ethan and the subject, but we don't interpret it. Interpreting is what the deceptive want listeners to do. We only want the subject's words to guide us. Just hanging out, this is passive and lacks personal connection. Just hanging out doesn't include anyone. Who is hanging out with who? Okay. 4 days out of the week, just hanging out. There's no pronoun here. There's no pronouns. This is, it doesn't include anyone who's hanging out. Just here indicates a comparison is happening in the subject's mind as well. So it brings to the question, what was hanging out being compared with in the subject's mind? Okay, something other than hanging out was in his mind when he says just hanging out. Now, just is an indication of persuasion as well. It can be, it very well may be here. We just hanging out, okay? Nothing else. But so far we have quantity, proximity, and passive language. It doesn't make any sense to me because he's not the type of guy to have any enemies. He didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. So we're going to focus on this. And now we're confronted with Ethan being spoken about in the negative, what Ethan's not. So we have passivity, we had quantity, we had proximity, but no real juice, no real emotional connection, no real I statements and commitments here to the relationship. And now we have Ethan being spoken about in the negative, what he's not, what doesn't make sense to the subject, what type of guy he isn't, and beef Ethan didn't have. The detective had served this up on a platter for the subject, and the subject opted not to share the details of the quality of the relationship, how much Ethan meant to him. Further, the subject elected to not share the positive things about Ethan, what Ethan was, the things very good friends appreciate about their very good friends, the things they will miss every day, the things they will remember and cherish. The subject elected to not share these things and instead merely communicated the quantity and the physical proximity. This is a bad sign. And after this, the subject communicates, and it doesn't make any sense to me. What doesn't make sense for the subject? He's not saying what it is in his mind. Why won't the subject not explain what it is? It doesn't make any sense to me because he is not the type of guy to have any enemies. He didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. So it seems to be the murdering of Ethan. He won't say that. He's not saying, I don't know what kind of bastard who would do this to my friend, my brother. You guys need to find this piece of crap who killed my friend. The subject isn't saying that. The subject isn't saying what it is. It doesn't make any sense to me. This is soft language for the murdering of a very good friend. Is there something about Ethan's life or actions that could make it make sense? Okay, so bear with me here. To me is a qualification. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. That's not what the subject is saying. It doesn't make any sense to me. This is something we say about a math problem. We know that there's an answer, and it does make sense objectively. It just doesn't make any sense to me. More on this. We are now confronted with the subject explaining why it doesn't make sense to him. Okay? Because it doesn't make any sense to me because of what Ethan wasn't. Ethan wasn't the type of guy to have enemies. He didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. This would logically follow that it would make sense to the subject if Ethan was the type of guy to have enemies. It would make sense to the subject if he did have beef with someone. Then it would make sense to the subject. The issue for the subject is not that he lost a very good friend. It's that it doesn't make sense to him. The words being said here aren't, have you found out who the psychopath son of a gun is who did this to my Ethan? The issue is whether it makes sense or not for the subject. It's noted that Ethan is referred to as a guy here. Ethan is a type of guy to the subject. This may indicate the perception of Ethan as a competition for a female. She hangs around other guys. Also, the subject is not saying that Ethan didn't have any enemies. The subject instead speaks about him passively. He's not the type of guy to have enemies. There's a difference. Okay, this is more declarative. Ethan didn't have any enemies. As far as I know, I'm his close friend. He didn't have any enemies. Now, the subject, it said, speaks about this passively. He didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. There's a potential qualifier there. The subject is not saying he didn't have beef with anyone. Instead, the subject said any sort of beef. We will not interpret for him. However, sort of is often interchangeable for somewhat. The subject doesn't qualify or recognize his own limited knowledge here as well. As far as I know, he didn't have any sort of beef with anyone. The fact that the subject is now murdered, instead of declaring the lack of beef or enemies regarding Ethan, the central one for a very good friend, the central question would be, who could have done this to Ethan? Who could have hated him so badly to do this? Or I am struggling to understand who would have wanted Ethan dead. Also, there would be natural questions like, are the investigators seeing evidence that this indicates this was a random intruder, intruders, or was someone or more, or was this, or some people who knew him? There's an indication of a need to persuade to the detective that Ethan didn't have any sort of conflict with anyone. What would be the driving force of that need? Again, and now that I'm going over this part of the analysis, it would make sense to the subject if he did have beef with someone. Okay, remember this. All right.
Yeah.
Kind of, if you could think back for me with Xana. Same questions there. Can you think of anybody that she was having issues with?
No, that's the huge confusing part about it. They were both super happy people, didn't like any drama.
Okay.
And yeah, and I had known Xana since my freshman year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has she ever spoken about somebody around her apartment that was troubling her?
Let me think. No, nothing comes to mind.
If you could think back for me with Xana, same questions there. Can you think of anybody she was having issues with? Now, one thing I'm just thinking about here, if this was my very good friend and his significant other, her name is Xana. Her name is Xana. Her name is one of the last things that she has now. She's lost pretty much everything. Her name, her memory, her wishes, her desires, her beliefs, her the good things that she had done in this world. Those are the last things. Her name's one of the most important things. The subject doesn't clarify that. Just noting that. No, that's a huge confusing part about it. They were both super happy people, didn't like any drama. Like, yeah, I had known Xana since my freshman year until now. No would have been, at least in a vacuum, solid and likely true. The subject continues, right? If you think back for me, can you think of anybody that she was having issues with? No. He continues on and says, the repetition indicates sensitivity, internal stress or tension relative to the question. That's a huge confusing part about it. Oops. There's a contrast that we are being confronted with here. There's a contrast between Ethan and Xana relative to anybody having issues with them. Ethan and Xana are both parts, but Xana is a huge confusing part. The embedded message here is that it is even odder for Xana to have issues with anybody as opposed to Ethan. Well, what were we just told about Ethan? That said, we observe with Ethan, it doesn't make sense, and with Xana, confusing. There's equivalence here in a sense. It's all about whether it makes sense or not. Again, it here is used in reference to the thing that is not being said. Xana has been murdered. It's the confusing thing about it. All right? The passive it. It is the murder of my friends. We won't say it for him if he cannot or will not. There is psychological distancing we're being confronted with here again. The subject is exhibiting that he doesn't want to interact or communicate the actual crime that has been done to the victims. The crime is psychologically distant. This is the subject is psychologically distancing himself from the very crime. So we're listening regarding how Xana having issues with anybody is a huge confusing part about it. The subject then goes passive again. They were both super happy people. The subject was talking about Xana, and now he's saying both. What does them being happy people have anything to do with the question? There's some reinforcement here with super, which is unnecessary. The subject continues with didn't like any drama. This is again passive and irrelevant. Whether one likes drama or not is irrelevant to whether they did have drama. And like is a filler indicating sensitivity. Yeah may indicate that the subject was preempting a question from the detective about his relationship or history to Xana, making the quality of relationship sensitive to the subject. Okay? If they were both super happy people, didn't like any drama, and like, yeah, right? I had known Xana since my freshman year until now. This again speaks of quantity of time. This does not speak to quality of relationship. What exactly does the subject mean by know? Okay, we don't know this. Does this mean know of, know personally? Does the subject no longer know Xana? All right, had known. This indicates a full processing of the death of Xana. These words by the subject, the fact that the subject's not sharing the information related to the quality of the relationship, okay, is indicating psychological distancing. All right. Subject says, yeah. I don't know why they did here. Has she ever spoken about somebody that around her apartment that was troubling her? Let me think. There's a huge pause here. No, nothing comes to mind. The subject appeared to really give this some thought. The pause indicates sensitivity to the question. The subject answers no, which would be a direct answer to the yes or no question. The subject then adds, nothing comes to mind. Now, the question was about whether Xana had or hadn't spoken about somebody that was around her apartment that was troubling her. The subject didn't say, she did not tell me about anything like that. And or Ethan hadn't told me that she was troubled by anyone. No, it appears that the detective has no concerns about the subject's potential involvement here. The answer here indicates that the subject hadn't thought about this subject, okay, until now. He needed time to think about it now. Think about it. He took a long pause to think about it. He's had 5 days to think about it. Nothing comes to mind, comes right now, right? Nothing has come to my mind. Given the subject had looked at his camera roll and Snapchat history. Oh, I said snapshot earlier. Oops. I'm a millennial. Snapchat history, had asked around, but their whereabouts the night before their murders, had been contemplating the sense of this. It doesn't make sense. Right? That's what he said. It seems like he would have shared a potential suspect or suspects. One. Considering the context of the 4 murders, the victims were young college students, parties were going on, a lot of interactions, circles of people, sororities, fraternities. It would seem almost impossible to consider that there wasn't one person that the subject hadn't thought about as a potential suspect. Okay. Now, the detective asked, has she ever spoken about somebody? Okay. So, fair point. But what are we talking about here? We're talking about this is supposedly a very good friend. Okay. Let's go back.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Did Ethan ever say something akin to, I think I'm going to go over and stay with Xana tonight because of more of a security issue?
Not necessarily security issue, because he lived over close to this, and I'm not sure if you guys know where that's at. It's probably 2 to 3 miles away from the Sigma Chi house.
Okay.
And he lived over there, so he stayed with Xana a lot of nights just because it's kind of a far walk away, and he didn't want to walk that far. Sure. That type of deal, but not necessarily a security issue.
Okay. This is really important. Okay, let me ask you this. Did Ethan ever say something akin to, I think I'm going to go and stay with Xana tonight because it's more of a security issue? And not like, she didn't quite finish, but the subject hops right on in. Not necessarily a security issue because he lived over close to this blank, and I'm not sure if you guys know where that's at. It's probably 2 to 3 miles away from the Sigma Chi house. The subject starts with not necessarily a security issue. The question here appears to be sensitive to the subject. This is not a no. This is the kind of verbiage that indicates that the question or insinuation of the question being responded to maybe encompasses too much, or the answer is conditional, and the question or insinuation encompasses too many conditions, that kind of thing. This is not an expected answer. It's similar to security may have been it, but it may have been for other reasons, right? That's what I'm talking about with conditions and how much it encompasses. So, what other reasons is the subject considering? We will see where the subject goes with that and how he articulates this. Because he lived over close to this place. Unfortunately, we don't have that location. It's redacted. Let's call it location X, because means he's explaining why he doesn't commit to the solid no to the question of security issue, right? Not necessarily a security issue, because, okay? Remember, the question is if Ethan ever said something akin to staying over with Xana for security reasons, security issue. It's a yes or no. Did he or didn't he? So the need for the explanation why he says not necessarily here is indicated as very sensitive to the subject. Again, a simple no would have been fine, and it's important to underscore that the detective is not asking for his opinion or perspective, but rather his experience. Did he hear Ethan say this or not is what is in question. We see which the repeat indicates internal stress. Because right? Note that the subject uses lived, which indicates a full processing of the death of Ethan, as opposed to Ethan lives at blank. Okay? He lived. It is known that Ethan is dead at this point, so it's not an indication of guilt or guilty knowledge per se. Any indication of Ethan being spoken about in the present would be an indication that the processing of his death hasn't been completed, okay? Which we like to see that. This note is helpful as it provides more context for the analysis in understanding the psychological reality and linguistic disposition towards the victims. The pause here also denotes sensitivity. Okay. Well, actually, before I move on, it is very common that even after months after someone close to you has died, it's still hard to accept it. It's hard, and that's verbalized. It's like, I don't want to accept it. It still is just so hard to comprehend that he's gone or that she's gone. So the more we see indications of a full and complete, if you will, processing of Ethan's death, that there's, let's just say we get through this whole thing and there's not one example of, speaking of Ethan or Xana in the present tense, may itself be an indication, but it's more of a background context. Okay. It's kind of the soil of the garden, if you will. All right. The soil doesn't tell us what's in the garden, but the soil is tells us maybe the health of the plants, right? The pause here also denotes sensitivity over close to him. The subject is not talking about where Ethan lived exactly, but where he lived close to. Location X, which may indicate psychological distancing with Ethan. Oh, and Xana's. Wait, hold on. No, just Ethan's. Okay. I didn't forget Xana. Which may indicate psychological distancing with Ethan's home. Okay, so he's talking about he lived over close to this, right? And I'm not sure if you guys know where that's at. It's probably 2-3 miles away from the Sigma Chi house. This is unnecessary information. He's apparently explaining why it was not necessarily a security issue. The subject indicates, again, internal stress here with of the two. The subject refers to the Sigma Chi house here as opposed to the lodge. We're going to listen closely as to why he's drawing attention to the distance between where Ethan lives close to, location X, and the Sigma Chi house. But again, we're still looking for explanation as to why it's not necessarily a security issue. And he lived over there, so he stayed with Xana a lot of nights just because it's kind of a far walk and he didn't want to walk that far, that type of deal, but not necessarily a security issue. And he lived over there. As far as we can tell, because of the redactions, he hasn't been specific about where Ethan lived. Okay, why can't he just say where Ethan lived? Ethan lived at blank. This is simple. The long way of referencing Ethan's home by explaining what his home is near to, location X, acknowledging that you guys may not know where it is, and explaining how far away the location X is from Sigma Chi Party without actually saying where Ethan lived, further supports the idea that the subject is psychologically distancing himself from Ethan's home. We also have another lived, which is another clue as to the subject's full processing of Ethan's death. So he stayed with Xana a lot of nights just because it's kind of a far walk and he didn't want to walk that far, that type of deal, but not necessarily a security issue. We now are confronted with 4 major issues. Number 1, the subject is saying that it was not necessarily a security issue, and his reason: Ethan preferred a quicker path to Sigma Chi. This has logical problems just within the context of the reasoning. Had the subject said, not necessarily a security issue because Ethan had access to Xana's security cameras from his place already, or something like that, then it would make sense within the linguistic logical context. Or if Ethan had said, subject. Ethan had told me that Xana would ask that he would stay over there on nights where she was home when she was home alone, right? This would indicate that there wasn't any tangible external force and entity of concern, but rather a simple internal fear of Xana's. So not necessarily a security issue, but just when Xana was home alone. This is not what the subject's saying at all. What the subject has said has nothing to do with security issues. Number two, the subject has not answered the question from the detective. Let's go back. Did Ethan ever say something akin to, I'm going to stay with Xana tonight because more of a security issue? Not necessarily a security issue, because, and we're waiting, and we're told he stayed with Xana a lot of nights. Because it's kind of a far walk and he didn't want to walk that far, that type of deal, but not necessarily security issue. Not necessarily. What? Not necessarily does not fit. The subject has not answered the question from the detective. No or yes. This underscores, bolds, highlights the importance of the question and is red alert that the subject has knowledge that there were security issues for Xana, were likely a concern for the security issues for Xana was likely a concern for Ethan. Considering that Ethan and Xana had been murdered, this is very concerning. Why would this question, this information, be sensitive enough to the subject that the subject would avoid answering the question? What need would there be to conceal this information? This may be an indication of guilty knowledge, and at the very least, a hindrance to the investigation to locate the criminal or criminals related to the Idaho 4 murders. Did Ethan ever say something? He's not answering the question. The subject has used the detective's question, number 3, by the way, as an opportunity to cheapen and minimize Ethan's and Xana's relationship. He has avoided answering the question directly, saying twice, not necessarily a security issue, and defended the reasoning of his view of this by deceptively diverting the detective's attention away from the subject of security issues and instead towards minimizing Ethan and Xana's quality of relationship. The subject focuses on the idea that their nights, or a lot of nights together, were merely due to the convenience of Ethan's walk to Sigma Chi. The subject wishes to convey that the very good friend of the subject and recently murdered Ethan stayed with recently murdered Xana a lot of nights, not because Ethan loved Xana and desired to protect her or was concerned for her security, but merely because it was a convenience to Ethan to go to Sigma Chi. Number 4, we do not interpret. However, the subject leaves little room for anything else but to be impressed that the subject has potentially critiqued Ethan's character as well as Xana's. There is a potentiality that the subject is conveying that Ethan wasn't a very good person. Ethan used or took advantage of Xana for selfish gain of achieving a more convenient form of travel. And there's also a possibility here that the subject has insinuated that Xana either didn't know this or didn't care, which may allude to Xana's low self-esteem or low self-respect, or at the very least, her just low self-awareness. This concern here is deep. Oftentimes, um, the guilty party, regarding a murder or abuser, etc., will find ways to insult or blame their victims. So to summarize, the subject didn't answer the question. Number 2, the subject's explanation of saying not necessarily a security issue doesn't make any sense. The subject diverted the question to diminish Ethan's and Xana's relationship. 4, the subject has potentially criticized the character of Ethan and Xana. When confronted with the indications like these, that challenge the fundamental presupposition that the subject is innocent of the Idaho 4 murders, the burden is to answer the question, what does all this mean in terms of the subject's psychological reality? That involves considering a set of other questions. Is the subject the murderer? or one of the murderers? Is the subject merely an accomplice to the Idaho 4 murders? Does the subject merely have guilty knowledge of the Idaho 4 murders, an accessory to the murders? Is there merely a jealous, is this subject merely a jealous admirer of Xana? Is the subject merely an enemy posing as a good friend of Ethan's? Is this merely a very honest, maybe even callous friend of Ethan's who is merely telling it how it is? Statement analysis done properly looks at the entire context of the statement, properly and carefully weighs each portion of the analysis, each singular indication, adding bricks of hardening clay to the macro understanding of the psychological reality of the subject. This portion of the analysis will be important to the conclusions for this analysis. Some housekeeping before moving on. The subject mentions that Ethan stayed with Xana a lot of nights just because. The subject believes that Ethan stayed there a lot. Also, the subject doesn't qualify with a lot of the nights. The subject didn't say that. In other words, the subject isn't clearly saying that of all the nights he stayed there with Xana, most or a lot of them were because of convenience. The subject might be saying all the nights Ethan stayed there were simply just because of the convenience of the walk to Sigma Chi. The subject also minimizes how far it was for the walk. It's kind of a far walk. He didn't say it's a far walk. This clarifies further. This helps in answering questions about the possibility that the subject understood or empathized with Ethan's actions. It does not appear so. It's kind of a far walk. We also have that type of deal. The subject is indicating that Ethan's and Xana's nights together were merely that type of deal. In a deal, both give and both benefit. It's acknowledged that that type of thing is often used interchangeably with that type of deal. However, the subject is qualifying, not necessarily a security issue, and explaining why and mentioning Ethan's convenience. Did the subject see this as merely a deal? Xana got something, and Ethan got something out of this deal? What did Xana get out of this deal? Was that the security that Ethan offered? Was that what the subject perceived, and possibly why the topic of security connected all of this, at least in the subject's mind? This underscores the psychological reality. The subject didn't perceive the relationship as a relationship of substance, but merely transactional.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know Kaylee and Maddie?
I didn't know Kaylee. I had met her, but I didn't know her very well. Maddie, kind of the same deal. I was a little bit closer with Maddie, but not near the amount of closeness I was to Ethan and Xana.
Okay. How about?
No, I didn't. I mean, obviously we were acquaintances,
Sure.
but we weren't close at all.
Okay. And
I was a little bit closer with, but not to the extent I was with Ethan and Xana, if that makes any sense.
okay.
Like I had known her for a little bit longer
Okay.
than Maddie and Kaylee.
Okay.
There's a lot here. All right. Do you know Kaylee and Maddie? The detective changed the subject instead of following up on this. So we had a huge piece here about the subject, Peter, speaking ill of Ethan and Xana, and the detective moved on. The detective changed the subject. What could have been drawn out of the subject via follow-up questions after this about, talk to me more about Ethan and Xana. I mean, Talk to me more about that. Holy moly, what would he have said? Anyway, we're moving on because the detective moves on. And here we go. I didn't know Kaylee. I had met her, but I didn't know her very well. Maddie, kind of the same deal. I was a little bit closer with Maddie, but not near the amount of closeness I was to Ethan and Xana. There's a lot here, guys. I didn't know Kaylee. The past tense again indicates a full processing of the death of Kaylee, which is now a pattern and helps us understand the psychological reality of the subject. The subject, it appears now fairly clearly, has processed their deaths, as we see this more afterwards. I had met her, but I didn't know her very well. The subject has not said, I've met her, or I've met her. Rather, I had. Again, I didn't know, showing the processing. There's a very here, which does have some emphasis. I met Kaylee, but I didn't know her very well. This is a simple sentence. The extra wording may indicate sensitivity to the question, especially considering the I didn't know Kaylee to begin with, right? It could indicate persuasion, psychological distancing from Kaylee with the then clarification follow-up. I didn't know Kaylee. I had met her, but I didn't know her very well. So the subject moves on to Maddie and says, kind of the same deal. I was a little bit closer with Maddie. The subject is indicating he was a little bit closer with Maddie, and then the subject changes the subject and surprisingly focuses on the other two victims that were asked about earlier, Ethan and Xana, but not near the amount of closeness I was to Ethan and Xana. The 3.5 knots indicates internal stress and tension of the subject. It is clearly seen here that the subject began to say Xana, and we can audibly hear the first syllable of the Z sound of Xana, and the subject stopped and said Ethan and Xana. This gives the indication, it suggests that Xana was closer to the subject in the subject's mind. Order relates to priority, okay? The need to stop mid-word, X, Z, indicates sensitivity, internal stress. It indicates the possibility that the subject did not want to give this away. Assuming this for a moment, there is an interesting use of verbiage here. Amount of closeness I was to Anna, right? Was to. Let's contrast this with the amount of closeness I had with what we think is Xana. He stopped after Z. So this may indicate that to the subject, at one point, Xana considered the subject, Peter, as close to her. This would indicate that the subject is unchanged regarding Xana, but that the subject perceives that Peter perceives that Peter's closeness from Xana's perspective is no more. Questions. Does this mean that Xana's death has severed this, making it now past tense? Or was Ethan's presence, his involvement with Xana, is what severed this closeness? Did Ethan replace the subject's closeness that Peter had with Xana? Zooming out, was the change of subject from Kaylee and Maddie an indication of psychological distancing from Kaylee and Maddie? Was this possibly a deceptive diversion? Do you know Kaylee and Maddie? Okay, he relates it to Xana and Ethan. Just saying. Okay, how about blank? No, I didn't. I mean, obviously we were acquaintances, but we weren't close though. We're going to call this person A right here. No, the question was not a yes or no question. Okay, how about name? This immediately indicates sensitivity to the question. Person A is very likely Dylan or Bethany. We've gone over the victims, go over the two roommates. It's not clear. It's merely speculation. But considering the flow of questioning here, this makes a lot of sense. We have more sensitivity indications. I didn't. Okay, how about, let's say Dylan. No, I didn't. I mean, obviously. Okay, I didn't is broken indicating internal stress. I mean further indicates sensitivity, internal stress. It's a pause. Obviously is an indication of persuasion. The detective is asking about his relationship with this person, his knowledge of them. If it were obvious, the detective likely wouldn't ask. Persuasion has a need to persuade. The employment of obviously indicates something like, it is silly to think anything differently than that. This is fascinating. No, I didn't. I mean, obviously, these words alone indicates that the subject wishes not to uncover the quality of his relationship here. We were acquaintances, but we weren't close though. The subject used past tense were and weren't. If this is Dylan or Bethany, what has changed exactly? When did they not become acquaintances? Dylan and Bethany are alive. This indicates psychological distancing from this person. The hitch of the word may indicate the internal stress here. Okay. Acquaintance. But here refutes or minimizes acquaintances, which acquaintances is an already diminished term of a relationship, indicating further psychological distancing from this person. I didn't is broken here and further denotes internal stress and tension. We weren't close. If speaking about someone who is now deceased or a context of an instance or event or relationship a long time ago, this past tense makes sense. We aren't close. This is not what the subject said. The past tense here makes little sense since it's assumed that this person A is alive, unless they are now close. Weren't close is open for now close. And if they weren't close, but they're now close, why the internal stress indications and the need to persuade that the subject is not close with her now? Okay, and this person, I was a little bit closer with that person, but not to the extent I was with Ethan and Xana, if that makes any sense. This is person B, okay? Person B. We have another indication of internal stress here with two I's. I is the most powerful word in statement analysis because it's the most powerful word in speech. A repetition of this word is a very clear indication of intense internal stress. We also have a past tense here, was. It is assumed that person B is either Bethany or Dylan being asked about here. If we are to interpret, the subject communicates that person B is a little bit closer to the subject than person A, but we don't interpret. The subject doesn't specify, as it is redacted here. We're not sure if he simply says person B in this redacted place, or if the subject recalls to person A here. Okay, so, and person B, I was a little bit closer with person A, right? He could have said that here. We don't know, right? A little bit seems like a very small amount. The subject is apparently being exact here with explaining the differences. A potential issue with closer is that it might be leakage. They are both close. One is closer and only by a little bit. The subject then says, but not to the extent I was with Ethan and Xana, if that makes any sense. The subject relates to his relationship with Ethan and Xana again, but this time he uses extent rather than amount. Last time he talked about amount, not near the amount, right? Now it's extent. He also says, I was with Ethan and Xana. The first time he related this, he used, I was to Ethan and Xana. Was to rather than was with. With indicates distance. I was watching Sherlock Holmes with my wife versus me and my wife, or my wife and I, were watching Sherlock Holmes. I, with, and wife. Wife could not be farther away in the sentence from I, and with separates. Here, me and my wife, or my wife and I, we're watching Sherlock Holmes. There's no with. Okay. So this verbiage choice and the change here helps with greater context and hardens the analysis in the above section related to I was to Xana. Okay, what we think is Xana. The subject then finishes with, if that makes any sense. On its face, this seems like common sense. People are closer with some rather than others. What about it wouldn't make sense? However, the question is, why did whether it makes sense or not seem to be a concern for the subject? This indicates sensitivity. The subject is sensitive about whether what he's saying makes any sense to the detective. When it's viewed in its proper context, the multiple indications of internal stress, the psychological distancing with person A and B, likely the two surviving roommates, the indications of persuasion and what they represent, and the subject's sensitivity, whether this makes sense or not, to the detective to cap it off, paints a clearer picture for us. Okay. So he just continues on by himself. Like, I had known her for a little bit longer. The subject continues on with no follow up question and adds this piece of information. Like, which is a caveat, may indicate further explaining. Her is a partial support of the assumptions that this is Dylan or Bethany, both females. Now, he seems to clarify, I had known her for a little bit longer. Three major issues with this. One, the change of language from closer to longer. Is there a change in reality to reflect this change? I was a little bit closer. Like, I had known her for a little bit longer. It appears that he wishes to clarify what he meant by closer. By closer, he meant know her longer. However, we don't interpret and tell him what he meant. We are open to that as an option. The other option is he simply wanted to add that. In addition to being closer, he also knew her a little bit longer. The latter appears to be hard to defend. It seems that Occam's razor would indicate he meant to clarify what he meant by closer. Either way, this relationship is again indicated as very sensitive to the subject. Before moving on to number 3, let's zoom out. If this is Bethany or Dylan, and Dylan, right? But this one specifically, just for the sake of argument, assuming they and the subject are all innocent people here, some outsider, intruder, or intruders murdered the Idaho 4, and these 3 people have nothing to do with it. The subject, Bethany, and Dylan. The closeness of these 3, the subject, Dylan, and Bethany, now would simply make sense. It would make a lot of sense. They have all just lost people near and dear to them. Death brings people together, especially temporarily, but often permanently. Where the loss is, where the hole is that someone was, it can naturally, fill up with others, especially those close to the one that we lost or the ones we lost. We naturally are gravitated to others that knew the one we lost. It brings a sense of closeness to the person we lost. There are often new stories and memories that we didn't have before of the person we lost because we're around people that knew them more, and we're hearing new things that we never knew, experiences that the lost one were not known about before. So the need to psychologically distance from these two is very unexpected. Number 3, the subject, it seems, gave himself away here. This is super important, okay? Super important. I had known her for a little bit longer. I had. Does he no longer know person B? The psychological distancing with this past tense use is extreme distancing. I have known her for a little bit longer. This is not what the subject said. I specifically pulled this up. I checked and made sure on this video. More specifically, the subject is comparing how long he has known each person B. He has known longer, unless he is saying that he had known her for longer, but now he doesn't know her anymore. Which would that make any sense if they're both alive? He doesn't know her anymore. The final note here is it seems that his psychological reality to person A and person B is related to a fixed singular point in time. It may be the Idaho 4 murders. Okay, that night, that morning. Said another way, as of last week, I had known her for a little bit longer. The connection between one, the night and the morning of Idaho 4, person A and person B, the subject, may be why the verbiage is coming out the way it is here. Okay. Okay. And person B, I was a little bit closer with person B. Pretty sure that's what he's saying here. Could be person A, but either way. But not to the extent I was with Ethan and Xana, if that makes any sense. Like, I had known her for a little bit longer. I had known person B. Let's keep going. Okay. Then Maddie and Kaylee. Whoops. It appears the subject realized there needed to be a clarification. The two thens indicate sensitivity, internal stress. And instead of comparing person B knowing longer with person A, which is what it seems he had conveyed, the subject clarifies person's B length of familiarity was being compared to Maddie's and Kaylee's. What does this change? Of course, this indicates sensitivity to the subject, but why the need to clarify this? How close the subject was to person A and person B is very important aspect here. Now, one thing to consider, like I had known her. He doesn't say who her is. Is that Xana? Or is he still talking about person B?
Okay. When was the last time you were over at the 1122 King Street address?
I was there Friday.
I was there Friday. This is a great question. Okay. When was the last time you were over at King? After all the sensitivity indications right before this, the indications of heightened stress, the meaning behind them, we are listening very closely. I was there Friday. This is not the same thing as the last time I was there was blank. I was there Friday. Oftentimes, deception comes in the form of the truth. I believe him that he was there Friday. Was this the last time he was there, though? He's not saying that. So we will not say it for him. That is not to say that he's being deceptive. He may not be. However, he could be. So we're keeping that open.
Okay. Tell me about that.
It was fine, just normal. We were in the apartment playing Pong.
Okay.
And just having a good time with each other. And that's the last. I was there for 15, 20 minutes. And then I went over to the White's apartments to hang out with my friends over there.
Okay. How's their Friday? Okay, tell me about that. It was fine, just normal. We were in an apartment playing Pong. It was fine. This is not what happened. This is what the subject felt about it. He's labeling it rather than sharing the contents of it. This is an indication that this is sensitive to the subject, and we immediately are alerted to persuasion. His view of it was fine, which in my personal experience, this is just okay. Not great, not bad, it was fine. Often, when we hear this in adults, it's commonly understood that this indicates there was something at least somewhat unpleasant about it, like a math test. It was fine. We often use or hear this language connected with something obligatory. However, we don't interpret, we allow the subject to guide us. Every person has their own subjective internal dictionary. These are merely considerations. It is not clear. We don't know what it is and why it was fine. So we're listening for information. The detective asked a couple good questions here and didn't contaminate the statement. The subject chose to talk about this experience on Friday by starting off with, it was fine, all by himself. And then, just normal. Normality language in an open statement is something that is flagged for close inspection. Just, placed in connection with it, reinforces the indication of persuasion, as it is a comparison word. What's indicated is that something other than normal was in mind when employing this word. Normality in an open statement is an indication of persuasion. Again, this is the subject's perception of it, rather than sharing what happened. Why is the subject's perception of it being just normal the subject's priority? When reading novels, a writer will often use a literary device like this. It was a normal day, unlike any other. And psychologically, we know as readers that something abnormal is about to happen. This concept of employing normality is why there is a concern about the subject thinking of something abnormal about this experience. The question was not, was it a normal day on Friday? The subject is bringing in normality all on his own, and persuasion has a need to persuade. We were in an apartment playing Pong. Now, he also kind of sounded like he asked a question there. Playing Pong? The subject uses the word we without an explanation as to who the we is. We denotes closeness and unity. Given the context, who was the subject with is obviously important to the investigation. The concealing of information, the concealing of identities is a very large concern here. Denotes sensitivity of pause. We were in an apartment playing Pong. An apartment, this is not specific to whose apartment this was. This denotes psychological distancing with the location here, and another indication of concealment is observed. It appears the subject was playing Pong in an apartment. By apartment, we do not know what he means exactly. This may indicate a bedroom. We don't know. Pong is likely referring to beer pong. Beer pong in a bedroom seems curious. However, we don't know what he means exactly by an apartment and a pong. And pong, we do not interpret. So, follow up questions. Talk to me about pong. Talk to me about apartment. The detective says, okay. And the subject says, and just having a good time with each other. And that's the last. I was there for 15 to 20 minutes. And then I went over to the White's apartments to hang out with my friends over there. The subject continues with a drawn out and. This indicates sensitivity, thinking. Just having a good time. We are now confronted with another indication of persuasion with just. Just indicates a comparison. Something other than having a good time was being compared in the subject's mind. Having a good time is again what he is labeling it as, but not sharing any more of the contents behind this label. Having a good time is passive. It's not. it's unspecific. It underscores the sensitivity and the psychological distancing from this time and place. Other than playing Pong, we do not know what happened here. We don't know who was there other than the subject. However, we do know that the subject has a need to tell the detective that it was fine, just normal, just having a good time with each other. Also, who was having a good time with each other? The subject did not say, I had a good time with blank. He didn't say, we had a good time with each other. There's a drop pronoun here, underscoring the psychological distancing to this time and place, right? Oh, I think I repeated this. Psychological distancing with the person or people that were there as well. So this is not a good sign. The subject continues, and that's the last. I was there 15, 20 minutes, and then the subject cannot finish the sentence here. He drops it. The subject, it seems, was going to say, and that's the last time I was there. However, it appears he couldn't say that. Why can he not say that? If he cannot say it, we will not say it for him. This supports the analysis of I was there Friday. These two pieces connect. He didn't say it then, and he's not saying it now. Oh, and he's now not saying it. Sorry, I misread it. I misread my own words. This indicates that this was not the last time he was at 11:22 King. Very concerning. I was there for 15, 20 minutes, and then in 15, 20 minutes, the subject had a fine time. It was just normal, played Pong in the apartment, had a good time with each other, and left. But not quite. The subject then said, and then. This denotes a passage of time, which means there's missing information. This time and place, and who the subject was with, is very sensitive to the subject, and the subject is indicating numerous psychological distancing indications and cannot say that this was his last time at 11:22 King. I went over to the White's apartments to hang out with my friends over there. The subject was asked about being over at 11:22 King, and the subject is now talking about where he went to next, underscoring the sensitivity and psychological distancing regarding this time and place. Where he went afterwards is unnecessary information and very likely unnecessary for the investigation. Or is it? That said, what he did there, if this is corroborated, would be very great place to investigate. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I see. I am just not communicating well with this. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is where he went afterwards is unnecessary information. And because it's unnecessary, it may very likely be important for the investigation. So what he did there, if this is corroborated, would be a great place to investigate. Who are the Whites? My is repeated here. My friends, indicating the internal stress for the subject. Over there is unnecessary reinforcement that he was over at the Whites. I went to the Whites after that. Cool. That would have been fine. Zooming out, there is no mention of friends at 11:22 King. There is right away mentioning of friends at the Whites. We have a contrast.
Okay.
I wasn't there for very long on Friday, but I was there for a number, like some minutes.
Okay. I'm going to have you circle back real quick to the 13th, early in the morning. When do you think was the last time that you saw Ethan and Xana?
Ethan and Xana, in the lodge, I'm almost positive because they went to my apartment after the lodge party ended to pack up all their things. And the lodge is the last place I saw them, around 1:20, 1:25.
Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna cut him off there just for a second. Okay. So the subject continues on after talking about the whites. The detective just says, okay, I wasn't there for very long on Friday, but I was there for a number, like some minutes. The subject continues on for very long. He wasn't there for. For what happened here? Okay. Sorry. Subject continues on. He wasn't there for very long. This is an indication of a potential persuasion. We have the and then up above, which indicates passage of time and missing information. So the persuasion here underscores and then. The subject then says on Friday, but denotes refuting or minimizing very long on Friday. It seems like a natural flow here would be, but I was there on Saturday. I wasn't there for very long on Friday, but, right? I was there on Saturday, or something like that. Not interpreting, just considering. He continues on and says, but I was there for a number like some minutes. The S here indicates internal stress. Like is a caveat to some minutes. Some minutes is an indication of further psychological distancing from this time and place. Some minutes is also a change of language from what he said before. He said 15 to 20 minutes before, and now it's some minutes. It seems that specifics of 1520 was not what he had intended, and he wanted to clarify that it was some, which of course some doesn't clarify anything. It's the opposite of clarifying. It clouds. There, here in the statement, is unclear, but I was there. It seems like he brought his thoughts back to 1122 King, maybe realizing he had moved on from 1122 King. However, he does not specify which there he was talking about, underscoring psychological distancing. All right. Then the detective turns the attention back to Ethan and Xana on the 13th. Ethan and Xana, in the lodge. Now, he says that. I'm going to talk about this. But she says Xana, Ethan and Xana. So he says Ethan and Xana. In the lodge, I'm almost positive because they went to my apartment after the lodge party ended to pack up all their things, and the lodge is the last place I saw them, around 1:20, 1:25. This is a great question from the detective. The subject, it appears, clarified how to say Xana's name is why he repeated their names. And like I said, it's a good thing to do. Would have liked to hear it sooner and would like to be very clear about that. It's Ethan and Xana. Xana is how you say her name. This is a dear friend of mine. Like, say her name right, okay? She's dead. All right. Indicates sensitivity, a pause. The is broken, indicating internal stress. The right. Ethan and Xana. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. In the lodge, this would have been fine. It's simple, strong. However, the subject continues, indicating a psychological need to reinforce this. We are listening. I'm almost positive because they went. The subject appears to reinforce this with a caveated positivity. Okay, that's not strong reinforcement. Okay? It serves only to weaken in the lodge. Wait a second. This would have been fine. It's simple, strong. However, the subject continues indicating, oh, yeah, reinforcing in the lodge. I'm almost positive. So the subject appears to reinforce in the lodge with a caveated positivity. Yeah, that's not strong reinforcement. It serves only to weaken in the lodge, right? The subject explains why he is almost positive. Because they went. The subject has another broken sentence here, indicating internal stress. We're eager to hear why he is almost positive. Because they went to my apartment after the lodge party ended to pack up all their things. The subject is saying that he is almost positive that the last place he saw them was in the lodge because they went into his apartment to pack up their things. Oh, wait, that's not what he said. To pack up all their things. This language is similar to breakups. Pack up all your things. Get out of here. All here indicates without exception. This gives an impression of finality. The subject doesn't wish to share what those things are, denoting psychological distancing with those things and this event. Recall. He said, also went down there to grab a couple things. That's what he said earlier in the statement. The subject earlier had dropped a pronoun, didn't specify who, and said, went down there to grab a couple things. This is a change of language. Grab a couple things. What changed from this to pack up all their things? This piece is critical to understanding the Idaho 4 murders, specifically Ethan and Xana. Tracking with the subject, he's explaining why he is almost positive that the last place he saw Ethan and Xana was at the lodge. And right now, Ethan and Xana are now in his apartment, not the lodge. So we'll continue to listen. The subject then continues on and says, and the lodge is the last place I saw them around 1:20, 1:25. The subject exhales, indicating sensitivity. It's a pause here, and not only that, a broken sentence of what was before it. Went to my apartment after the lodge party, ended up to pack up all their things, and big old exhale, broken sentence, underscoring the sensitivity. And now we have a solid, the lodge is the last place I saw them. We're not clarified, well, it's not quite solid, is it? But we're not clarified as to why he was almost positive. Why is he almost positive that the lodge was the place? The last time he saw them before this was his apartment, his own apartment. And now he simply just states it. He breaks off his sentence and just states it, that the lodge is the last place he saw them. No reason given. He simply needs to be believed here. However, he doesn't stop. He then finishes with around 1:20, 1:25, which is fairly exact. It's a 5-minute range. He was almost positive about where he saw them last, and now he's almost exact when he saw them last. Even though the last place he saw them, according to his account, was in his apartment up until this point. Up until the broken sentence, a big old exhale, and then just a simple sentence here. The lodge is the last place I saw them. Even though the last place he saw them, according to his account, is his apartment, earlier in the account, the subject talked about how nobody remembers them coming with us. And he asked them, and nobody remembers seeing them. Now, the subject knows almost the exact time he saw them last.
Okay. Did they say where they were going to?
They didn't.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so this is absolutely enormous. The subject, it seems, forgot what he said earlier. He said, they, Ethan and Xana, they said they were going to come with us, but nobody remembers them coming with us. The subject has been caught in a lie here. Did they say where they were going? They said they were going to come with us, but nobody remembers them coming with us. He started off his account here, and now they didn't. The detective says, okay. And then he says, no. Okay, let's just look. Okay, did they say where they were going to? They didn't. Okay. No. The subject adds no. And we know why he felt the need to reinforce this. We know he was lying. He knew he was lying. He knew this needed reinforcement, and he gave it with a no. This is a perfect example of why statement analysis is so reliable. Had we not known that he lied, you may not believe me here. Hey, look, it seems like he's reinforcing they didn't, right? That's what statement analysis is telling us about his psychological reality. Unfortunately, the detective and the trooper missed this outright lie. The fact that the subject is one of the last people to see Ethan and Xana alive, they were in his apartment the early morning hours, possibly minutes to hours before they were murdered. Considering this lie and the many deceptive indications makes this subject a major focal point in understanding the Idaho 4 murders.
And
I was just assuming, sorry to interrupt, I was just assuming that they were going to go back to their place, which I'm guessing that's what they did.
Okay.
And he continues. I was just assuming, sorry to interrupt, I was just assuming that they were going to go back to their place, which I'm guessing that's what they did. The subject interrupts the detective to add more. We are listening. There's broken fragment here indicating internal stress. I was just assuming. The subject now tells us what he was assuming in the past, indicating that he was thinking at the time in the lodge. The just indicates persuasion and that something other than assuming was in mind of the subject. We are confronted with another sorry here. Again, this is now more likely that this sorry is indicative of a deeper guilt than simply interrupting here. Okay? He's just been exposed in a lie. He knows that he lied there. And then the sorry comes. Also, the sorry to interrupt may also be a tell that the subject is trying to convey, I'm a rule follower. I respect people. We don't interpret, but we consider. He reiterates, I was just assuming. So he says it twice. I was just assuming. Sorry to interrupt. I was just assuming, which underscores the sensitivity here for the subject, that they were going to go back to their place, which I'm guessing that's what they did. Again, the subject must have forgotten what he had already told the detective and the trooper. And not only did he forget what was pointed out earlier here, they said they were going to come with us. Nobody remembers them coming with us. The subject also had said, I've asked all of because we went to AGR, another fraternity right there neighboring to us, and I asked them and they don't remember them being there, so I'm pretty positive they weren't there. However, now the subject is saying he just assumed that they went home.
And just to clarify, that would have been walking on foot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's pretty close right there. It's, I don't know, a 3-minute walk.
The subject explains why that would have been on foot. Right? Okay, just to clarify, that would have been on foot. Yeah. Okay. And the subject continues. His yeah needed reinforcement. Okay, this is the same principle here. They didn't. Okay. No. And they were, and then he continued on. He further needed to reinforce. They didn't. And now, okay, and just to clarify, that would have been walking on foot. Yeah. Okay. And he continues. We can see why this is sensitive to him. These are not unclear. He says it twice, okay, because it's pretty close right there. It's, I don't know, 3-minute walk. Referring to their place. Right? This is all talking about their place, Ethan and Xana's place. The I don't know may be an indication of psychological distancing. Has he walked this path? Has he studied this path? Has he timed this path from Sigma Chi to their place and back? Is this why the knowing this time and this walk is sensitive, that he goes into the negative I don't know? This all is coming as unnecessary information. The rule is unnecessary information may be the most important information. Is this the murderer's path? Is this why the psychological distancing has been observed regarding 1122 King? It's pretty close to Sigma Chi. It's right there. It's, I don't know, 3-minute walk. Now, another thing as I'm going through this right now, there seems to be a persuasion that they walked on foot. Did they actually walk on foot? This is a major question because there is a need to persuade here. Let's continue on.
Okay. Do you recall the things that they were packing up?
Yeah. They had a couple of beers, and Ethan may have grabbed his formal coat. And
I'm sorry, they had a couple of what?
beers.
Beers. Okay.
Do you recall what the things that were packing up? Great question. Indicates a sensitivity here. It's a pause. By the way, do you see why the ums need to be noted and not hand waved away? Moving on. They had a couple of beers. This is passive. They had a couple of beers. When? They drank a couple of beers? They had a couple of beers. Did they grab a couple of beers? Right before beers, there was indicating sensitivity. A pause to think. Another one. And Ethan may have grabbed his formal coat. And Ethan didn't grab his formal coat. He may have. Remember, the subject said, pack up all their things. The question in mind is, who packed up all their things? Okay, they. Was it Ethan and Xana? Was it the subject and others? Was the subject getting rid of all their things that were in the apartment? The subject then thinks more at the end here, indicating sensitivity and indicating he was going to say more. And unfortunately, he gets interrupted. This is very unfortunate for obvious reasons. Is the formal coat of Ethan's found? What was it found? at 1122 king. This is unknown to me.
Yeah.
I thought you said ears, like you'd put on. Okay.
No.
Okay, formal gear, a couple of beers. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I'm pretty sure that's it.
Okay. What
If
color?
there was anything else I didn't see.
Okay.
Ears, okay. I thought you said ears. Oh, no. The repeat no here indicates sensitivity, potentially internal stress. Okay, formal gear, a couple of beers, okay. Yeah. And that's I think that's it. Pretty sure that's it. The subject continues on, however, he takes the opportunity via the break-in conversation by the detective to say that's it. Indicates sensitivity, almost as if he was considering saying more. He says that's, and it breaks into a fragment, underscoring the sensitivity and internal stress. He says, I think that's it, which is caveated. It's indicated that psychologically he felt that it was not strong enough. And he almost repeats with a slight variation, says, I'm pretty sure that's it. I think that's it. I'm pretty sure that's it. Okay. He continues on. If there was anything else, I didn't see it. I didn't see. The subject entertains a hypothetical. If there was anything else, then he didn't see. The subject is not saying, that's what I saw them grab. The subject is alerting that there may be more.
Okay. What color was the formal coat that he?
Black.
Okay. Go ahead, Kristin. If I didn't tell you, I'm here with Trooper Kristin Noah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Did they have a backpack, or did Xana have a purse that they were putting these items into?
I think that Xana had a bag, but I'm not 100% positive.
Okay.
Okay.
Would you know what that generally would look like, if it was like a common bag that she carried around all the time, or if it was
I don't.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, what color was the formal coat? Black. Black. Okay, go ahead, Kirsten. Did they have a backpack, or did Xana have a purse that they were putting these items into? I think that Xana had a bag, but I'm not 100% positive. The subject caveats that Xana had a bag, and the extra caveat at the end indicates the sensitivity. The indication that the subject may have considered that there may be more is further supported earlier. If there was anything else, right? He threw out that hypothetical. The subject is psychologically distancing himself from these items. The subject knowing these items is sensitive to him. Now, one thing that I just noticed is bag is a word that the trooper hadn't used. Backpack, purse. I think Xana had a bag. Okay. Keep this in mind. Oh my goodness. Okay. But do you know what generally would look like if it was a common bag? I'm sorry. This is the third sorry in the statement. We have a repeat of I, then I, underscoring the internal stress regarding this subject matter for the subject. I am wondering if he just realized what he had said. Okay. Then the subject continues on. In college, we kind of go through backpacks really quickly. The subject then speaks passively about what happens in college, which doesn't directly address the question, underscoring the sensitivity here and denotes potential deception.
Okay.
In college, we kind of go through backpacks really quickly.
Sure.
You tend to lose them or they break. I don't know what type of bag or anything about what it looked like.
Okay.
The subject now employs the universal you. This is psychologically including the detective and the trooper into the statement. This is often used as a deceptive technique and underscores the psychological distancing here. We're not talking about what they tend to happen. There is a need to stop talking about what he knows. And I think of a pressure valve release. I'm sorry. Okay. In college, now I'm going to talk about college. What happens? And now I'm going to bring you in. However, we may have very insightful leakage here. Lose them or they break. Is Xana's bag lost? Did it break in a confrontation? This would be a great question to bring to the investigator as they may connect this with crime scene evidence. The double I here indicates internal stress. I don't know. He then goes back to the question directly and says, I don't know what type of bag or anything about what it looked like. This is not the same thing as I don't remember. It would be assumed that the subject, considering his account, had seen Xana's bag. That which is said in the negative is often more important than that which is said in the positive in statement analysis. He also shows the psychological need to reinforce with or anything about what it looked like. The what continues to reveal internal stress. He's communicating that he doesn't know anything about what this bag looked like, which is essentially the same thing as, I don't know anything about this bag. We don't interpret, though. Consider he had said he thought she had a bag. He just wasn't 100% positive. Why would he even mention this then? If he doesn't know anything about what it looks like, this is mind-boggling. This is someone that was so close to Ethan that Ethan came over all the time. They talked multiple times a day. He was there Friday over at 11-12-22 King. The subject's psychological distancing with this bag is clear. And I think we are really seeing what's happening here. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Okay, so you have my phone number. I'll be pushing out my email address as well.
Okay.
We are asking for any photos or videos, especially of that evening, even prior to the Sigma Chi party, would be helpful.
I can look again and send you what I have from that night.
Okay, that'd be great.
Just on this phone number?
Okay. See my number. We were asking for any photos or videos, especially of that evening. I can look again and send you what I have from that night. I can send you, again, we have a can, which may indicate obligation. It's not the same as I will. Can is merely saying able. There's a difference between willing and able. We don't interpret, but this may reflect the psychological reality of the subject's view of this notion. I can look again and send you what I have from that night. The subject appears to have forgotten what he had said. I looked on my camera roll and my snapshot memories, and I don't have anything past anything from after the formal party where Ethan and I were in our nice clothes. It appears the subject will look again and send what he has from that night. What changed? It is curious. Is it because he psychologically believed that he was not being looked at as a suspect? Phone number. Okay, I want to hear this little part here, and then we'll be done.
Yeah,
It's
that's
fine?
yep.
Okay.
This is my work phone, and you're more than welcome to give it to people if, in your circles, you're hearing information that you think they need to pass on to me. Please give them this number.
Okay.
Is there
Will do.
anything that you can think of that I forgot to ask you?
No, I'm assuming you guys have talked to the brother and sister.
I personally have not. We have quite an.
Is there anything you can think of that I forgot to ask you? No. I'm assuming you guys have talked to the brother and sister. Indicate sensitivity to the question. No, the subject says this, but continues on with something very interesting, saying that he's assuming you guys talk to which is a pause indicating sensitivity, and then which indicates internal stress, the brother and sister. The subject does not specify whose brother and sister. This indicates psychological distancing with whoever's brother and sister he's referencing. The assumption would be Ethan, since within the statement, the subject is talking about Ethan's sister. But this is unclear, underscoring the sensitivity and distancing here with what would be assumed is one of the victims of the Idaho 4 murders. This also indicates that the subject himself has not reached out to them. This was apparently his very good friend, if this is again is Ethan's sister and brother. All right, y'all. That's all I got. I believe Peter is a suspect. And I am shocked. I'm shocked by it. I'll tell you that the part about this, there was a couple, but the number one thing was when he talked about where Ethan and Xana went to his apartment and grabbed their things and packed up their things. That was huge for me. Bethany's statement has been in the back of my head. And when she said she went in, she says, as I was leaving, I went in to our friend's room to grab a backpack. And I saw, and Ethan and Xana were sitting on the couch just listening to music. And Peter's statement connected with Bethany's. And I felt that connection needed to be explored. Because the big question, again, for me, I have less questions about Kaylee and Maddie and more questions about Ethan and Xana. And I don't think I'm alone. But I think Peter has clarified a lot. And I'm very excited about that. And I do realize that Peter has another interview, which is wild to think about because look at how much what is this? We've listened to 13 minutes. This is actually just really 12 minutes of interview. So, yeah, exciting stuff, and I'm very excited to go over Lakeland. And I'm wondering how many people were involved in this, because that number is growing. So, with that said, God bless y'all, and we'll see you next time.